Hello, my name is Kyung Yoon, the incoming chair of Philanthropy New York's Board of Trustees. The board has been working these, you can hold your applause, yes, okay. Let me say something first. The board has been working these last 2 years, as our strategic plan called for, to identify and highlight the most promising practices in our field. Today's conversation is just one more way that we can identify and think about, as a community of funders, the kinds of practices and strategies that serve our sector best. It's impossible to examine philanthropy critically without providing some context about the state of need and the lack of equity today. And so to guide us in this examination, it is my pleasure to introduce our first Phil talker, Anita Cozart, Managing Director of Policy Link. And we are very fortunate to have Anita here with us today. But before she joins us on the stage, and we'll be presenting some current trends and data on giving in the United States, we're going to do a little exercise and have some fun. We're going to take a quick poll from the room to see what we are thinking, and let's do this together. So I know we were all, told, put your phones away and pay attention to the stage, but I'm asking you to all pull your phones out and still keep them on silence, but pull them out. And so let's start with this, and you'll use your phone to respond to an opinion that I'm going to be asking you about. So it's just sort of like American Idol. Please, so take out your device and participate, and you can do it in 2 ways. You can go to your web browser and open it and type in the URL to start, which is pollev.com. I have to say, I've tried it both ways. The other way is to do it by text message. The web browser seems to work better. It's just faster because maybe of the connections in here. But you can go to your text message and send a message to the number 22333, and then the message you will send is PNY 631. So, is everyone ready? Not yet? So if you go to pollev.com, then you'll get a prompt to join a presentation, and then you put in PNY 631, or you text message 22333 and send a message PNY 631. So let's take a minute. Okay, so we're going to just do a practice run and take a quick poll now to get the hang of it. So I want you to think, and it doesn't have to be very deeply, but what word or phrase do you think about when you think of Philanthropy New York? Type in the word and in your message and then submit or send. And what you're going to see is that we get a word cloud. And it's so much fun to see it form. I love technology. Wow, community, collaboration, learning. I thought I'd see more fun. Oh, well. Now we are going to try to take 2 polls to help us get into the right frame of mind. Thank you. So the first poll, economic insecurity is defined as living in households with incomes below 200% of the federal poverty level. What percent of the US population is economically insecure? Put in your best guess. We're seeing the most of 40, 60, 40. Well, the correct answer is roughly 1 in 3, 33%. So the next, we're going to just try one more. How many American households spend more than half of their income on rent or do not have a home at all? 8 million, 12 million, or 20 million? And for the answer, I'm going to invite onto the stage Anita so that she can help us understand this data. Anita, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really good to be here, and happy 40th. It's great to celebrate this wonderful annual event with you all. And so at PolicyLink, we are a national research and action institute that is dedicated to advancing racial and economic equity. And for us, that means really using policy tools, advocacy, narrative change, framing, and other tools to be able to dismantle unjust systems, unjust policies, and open up opportunity for all. And we've really seen there's lots of sectors that are important to that work: nonprofit, government, private sector, and certainly philanthropy. You all are very important to that. And we've seen ways that philanthropy has done work to really advance equity. And so I'm going to share a little bit about that. And I'm also going to share how philanthropy is leveraging data to move towards action. So one of the things that's important to understand as we look at data is that our nation, built on a foundation of structural racism, inevitably data is going to lead us towards race. And we need to be able to go where the data is going to lead us. And so with that bit of background, I'll just share a couple of examples from as it relates to income and also as it relates to housing. From the perspective of income, one of the trends that we see is that a lot of workers of color actually work for small businesses. And for a host of reasons, only 1 in 5 small businesses is really able to provide retirement services and benefits. And so that, as you can imagine, creates real barriers to being able to build wealth for those workers of color. And so one of the things that Prudential Financial realized is that they needed to do a little bit more work understanding the background of that. And so they did research focused on Latinx communities and what were the financial services needs that they really had. And so as they dug into that, they were able to start to create products that were really targeted towards those communities, particularly other vulnerable communities as well. And alongside came the Prudential Foundation, and they investigated how they could use their advocacy to be able to break down the barriers that existed for small businesses to be able to provide those retirement services and benefits. And we call that the competitive advantage of racial equity, and that's where Prudential itself and the workers of color actually receive some benefits as it relates to that. And so when you think about that in place, I want to point you to Cincinnati. And so in Cincinnati, one of the things that leaders in Cincinnati realized was that based on some research and data analysis that we did with them, is that black workers were making $23 average wage per hour. And that was $6 less than white workers in that same region. And they realized that they were leaving a lot on the table in terms of GDP. We did some research around that and found what the cost was of that income disparity. And so that lit a fire under leaders there. And so the Greater Cincinnati Foundation really helped to fund setting of a table all in Cincinnati to investigate what was the equity strategy they needed as a city to be able to address that gap plus other gaps that were related to that. And so I'm happy to report that they've made progress on that equity strategy. And even just earlier this year, they were able to put a policy in place that said that employers were not allowed to look at salary history, which was one of the major contributors to what that historic barriers were to being able to have a higher income. And so similarly, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, found themselves motivated by the data to action. They were ranked 78 out of 100 in terms of racial inclusion, and that translated to, through some research that we did, that translated to revenue that they left on the table of $5 billion. And that too motivated a number of folks from different sectors to come together. The Heinz Foundation and the Pittsburgh Foundation funded a table called All in Pittsburgh, still in existence and doing great work putting together an equity strategy, moving that forward. And I'm happy to report that they, earlier this week, started an Office of Racial Equity that is charged with implementing the equity strategy that they developed through the All in Pittsburgh table, really focused in on the African Americans in Pittsburgh that have not received all the benefits of the resurgence that Pittsburgh, particularly in eds and meds, has seen over the last 20 years. So just kind of spanning out nationally and looking at the issue of housing, which is also a major issue for our nation. The funders for housing and opportunity, composed of 10 of the largest foundations that are focused in on housing. Ford is one. And they identified that, per your poll earlier, 12 million vulnerable renter households were really paying more than 30% of their income. 30% of their income, which is, by all standards, is not sustainable, for rental housing, and that was creating ripples of instability in lots of different communities. So they, with some assistance from PolicyLink, really built kind of a theory of change really driven by that data and that analysis. And that theory of change causes them to make investments in policy advocacy, organizing, and narrative change. And all of those things have two lenses that are really important. One is around racial equity, and then the other is around community voice. And then my last example is from the San Francisco Bay Area, where PolicyLink is headquartered. So San Francisco, the foundation there, along with PolicyLink and the University of Southern California, formed a partnership together to particularly, 10 minutes? Oh, sorry. Okay, there's more stories than I can tell then. So in that part, through that partnership, we did a lot of research to really investigate what were the factors creating and behind the housing crisis that's there, and who is it affecting the most. And so we found, not surprisingly, that the stagnant wages and the skyrocketing housing prices were leaving 1 out of 2 renters were just overly cost burden and subject to eviction and that kind of thing. And so we took a closer look at that data to really understand that there's a racial lens to that data as well, and finding out that 6 out of 10 Black, Latinx, and Native American renters were cost burdened. And so understanding the racial equity implications of that, the San Francisco Foundation really moved forward with an advocacy strategy around particularly trying to secure more resources to stabilize housing for low-income renters, and then also have worked to create a fellowship program where they're embedding leaders inside of local government so that they can actually implement kind of the tenant protection strategies, the anti-displacement strategies, and other affordable housing strategies. So really doubling down on their investment there. So all of these are great examples. I could give you more. I think what's really important to understand about all these examples is this, and this is what really is closest to my heart, is that all of this data, all of these outcomes are things that leaders from communities of color have been talking about for decades. They've been trying their best to shout it from the rooftops for lots of structural reasons and individual reasons. They've not been heard. We see it as our mission to give voice to that, and we really want philanthropy to join us in that. The other part of the data story is that those same leaders have also been doing the hard work and digging in to craft solutions to those challenges. And the resources that they need are additional data that really bolsters what they found in community. The other part of what they need is resources to really be able to scale up the solutions that they found that work to really advance racial equity. And so that is the work of our generation, to be able to actually win on equity, to realize for the first time a just and fair society in which all can participate, prosper, and reach their full potential. And I can think of none better partners than the ones right here in this room. And philanthropy has a great role. Let's step right into it. So what I want to do now is have you all turn to your neighbor, and you get 3 to 4 minutes to discuss this question, which I hope I've provoked some answers to by my talk. And that question is simply this: how can philanthropy use policy to be able to advance racial equity? How can philanthropy use policy to advance racial equity? Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your time.